On April 1, 2026, America celebrated its greatest space achievement in over 50 years. For astronauts had just flown around the moon and come home safely. The world watched. Newspapers ran front-page headlines. NASA called it a triumph. And while the world was still cheering, China was loading its own spacecraft onto a launch vehicle. Not to fly around the moon. To land on it. At the exact location that America has identified as the most strategically critical spot on the lunar surface. And they are launching before the end of this year. Nobody is saying this out loud. But everyone in the space industry knows what it means. To understand what is happening, you need to understand what the moon's south pole actually is. Because most people picture the moon the way it looked in 1969. A barren gray rock. Beautiful. Lifeless. Empty. That picture is completely wrong. The moon's south pole is one of the most strategically valuable locations in the entire solar system. Scattered across the south pole, buried inside craters that have never seen sunlight, are deposits of water ice. Not metaphorical water. Not traces. Actual frozen water. Billions of tons of it, sitting in permanently shadowed craters, where temperatures drop to -400 degrees Fahrenheit. So cold that these craters are some of the coldest places in the entire solar system. The ice has been there, untouched, for potentially billions of years. Now, why does that matter? Because water is rocket fuel. Split water into hydrogen and oxygen, and you have propellant. The same propellant that powers rockets. The same propellant you need to go to Mars. If you can mine that water ice on the moon, you do not need to launch rocket fuel from Earth anymore. You manufacture it on the moon. Cheaply. In enormous quantities. That changes the entire economics of space exploration. A single ton of payload launched from Earth costs roughly $10,000 per kilogram. Manufacturing propellant on the moon could cut that by an order of magnitude. Whoever controls the South Pole, controls the fuel station for the entire solar system. And right now that prize has no owner. But not for long. China's mission is called Chang'e 7, named after the Chinese moon goddess. And it is unlike anything humanity has ever sent to the moon. It is not a single spacecraft. It is 5. An orbiter, a relay satellite, a lander, a rover, and something completely new. A hopping probe. That last one is the one that should get your attention. Here is the problem with the moon's south pole. The water ice is hidden in craters that never see sunlight. They are in permanent shadow, permanently dark, and extremely cold. You cannot land a solar-powered rover in a crater with no sunlight. It would die instantly. So China engineered something that no other country has ever built. A probe that lands in the sunlit area near the crater rim, and then physically jumps into the shadowed crater below. It carries a water molecule analyzer. It will drill into the surface, extract material, and for the first time in history, directly sample lunar water ice. China aims to be the first country on Earth to directly confirm and collect lunar water ice. The chief designer of China's lunar program, Wu Weiren, said it plainly. It lies in water. The South Pole lies in water. He was not speaking in riddles. He was telling you exactly what they are going to find. The spacecraft has already been built. It was flown from Beijing to the Wenchang launch facility on April 9, 2026. Engineers are preparing it for launch right now. The target date is August 2026. 3 months from today, here's where it gets specific and uncomfortable. China's Chang'e 7 has a landing address. It is not vague. It is not approximate. The preferred site is the illuminated rim of Shackleton crater. 88.8 degrees south latitude. 123.4 degrees east longitude. Shackleton crater sits almost directly at the moon's south pole. Its rim receives near constant sunlight. Its floor is in permanent shadow, and almost certainly filled with water ice. It is the most strategically valuable single location on the surface of the moon. And it is exactly where NASA plans to land American astronauts. The same crater. The same region. The same resource. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 says no country can claim ownership of the moon. You cannot plant a flag and say it is yours. But here is what the treaty does not say. It says nothing about establishing a base. It says nothing about mining resources. It says nothing about building infrastructure. So the legal question is not whether you can own the moon. The question is, who gets there first and builds something permanent? Because the country, or the coalition, that establishes operational infrastructure at the South Pole first will set the terms for everyone who comes after. They define the safety zones, the extraction protocols, the rules of the game. Not through warfare, through presence. In geopolitics, showing up first is often the same as winning. Here is something that almost never gets covered in space reporting. This is not just a race between the United States and China. It is a race between two entire blocks of nations. On one side, the Artemis Accords, a framework led by the United States, signed by over 40 countries, establishing shared principles for moon exploration. On the other side, the International Lunar Research Station, a framework led by China and Russia, with 13 countries signed on, including Pakistan, Egypt, Venezuela, Belarus, and South Africa. China is not trying to get to the moon secretly. They have announced a target of recruiting 50 nations, 500 institutions and 5,000 researchers into their lunar program by the early 2030s. They are not building a mission. They are building an empire. And here is what makes that possible. China has hit every single lunar mission milestone it announced on time. Chang'e 1, lunar orbit. On time. Chang'e 3, first soft landing since the Soviets. On time. Chang'e 4, first ever landing on the far side of the moon. On time. Chang'e 5, sample return from the near side. On time. Chang'e 6, sample return from the far side. On time. China's program has no such contradiction. Every mission they send does science. Every mission advances the base. Nothing is performative. Everything is strategic. Let us think through what happens if Chang'e 7 succeeds. If the hopping probe descends into that shadowed crater, and the water molecule analyzer confirms usable quantities of ice, China becomes the first country to directly confirm and sample lunar water ice. That finding gets published. It becomes the scientific baseline. Every future conversation about where to mine, where to build, what to extract, starts with China's data. China has already announced plans to build a permanent base at the lunar South Pole, a facility designed for long-term robotic and eventually crewed operation. They are calling it the International Lunar Research Station. And 13 countries have already signed on to help build it. The base is not hypothetical. The agreements are signed. The timeline is set. And here is what analysts are saying, but news channels will not put it this bluntly. If China finds water ice first, and builds first, they do not need to claim ownership of the moon. They just need to be there. Because whoever operates the infrastructure at the South Pole decides who can refuel, who can resupply, who can stay. Every country that comes later, including the United States, will be landing in a neighborhood that China built first. On the moon, infrastructure is sovereignty. Experts estimate the cislunar economy could be worth more than $10 trillion annually by 2050. The South Pole is the entry point. Here is the part of this story that should genuinely disturb you. There is no international agreement governing what happens at the lunar South Pole. The Outer Space Treaty was written in 1967, before anyone had walked on the moon, before water ice was confirmed to exist there, before private companies were capable of building lunar spacecraft. It bans national ownership of the moon. It says nothing about safety zones. It says nothing about resource extraction. It says nothing about what happens when two missions target the same crater. The United States created the Artemis Accords to fill that gap. A voluntary framework, no enforcement mechanism, no binding obligation. China and Russia did not sign. China's position is that the Artemis Accords are an American attempt to write the rules before anyone else arrives. So right now, as two spacecraft prepare to land near the same crater, there is no agreed protocol for what happens if they interfere with each other. No rules for contamination zones. No rules for who owns ICE-1 probe extracted. No rules for anything. We are about to have a geopolitical confrontation on the moon with no referee. And no rulebook. And the race is already underway. The moon is not the destination. It is the launchpad. The reason every serious space agency is fixated on the lunar South Pole is not because the moon is the final goal. It is because whoever controls the moon's resources controls the ability to reach Mars. A mission to Mars requires enormous quantities of propellant. If you manufacture that propellant on the moon, from water ice, your cost per mission drops by a factor that makes Mars missions routine rather than historic. The moon becomes a fueling depot, a staging area, the first node in an interplanetary logistics network. And whoever designs that network first defines the standards, the docking ports, the communication protocols, the power grids. Just as the country that built the first railroads shaped the economies around them, the country that builds the first cislunar infrastructure will shape every mission that follows. That is what is at stake in August 2026. Not a single mission, not a scientific paper. The opening move in a game that will define human civilization beyond Earth. So here is where we actually are. America just flew around the moon for the first time in 50 years. The world celebrated. And 3 months from now, China will launch a 5-part spacecraft to the lunar South Pole, with a hopping probe that jumps into permanently shadowed craters, to directly sample water ice that no human has ever touched. They will do it before America lands anyone on the moon, before Viper launches, before Blue Moon lands, before NASA's Artemis IV crew even begins its final training. The 1960 space race ended with a man on the moon and an American flag in the regolith. This race does not end with a flag. It ends with a fuel depot, a base, a permanent presence. And the country that gets there first does not just win a trophy. They write the rules for everyone who comes after. We are 3 months away from finding out who that is. If this is the kind of story you think more people need to hear, subscribe. Because when Chang'e 7 launches in August, I want to be the channel that tells you exactly what it means.